Today is January 8th. My name is Rob. I am an alcoholic, and it is a thrill to be with you here today as we journey through the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions. Yesterday, we finished up Bill's story from Chapter 1, and, started off awful bleak, but sure does end on a high note, all thanks to a common solution, which will be talked about in Chapter 2, entitled, There is a Solution. So we'll be reading the first 5 pages of this chapter, Chapter 2 today, 17 through 21. And we will also be reading page 22, I believe. It's either 22 or 23. I'll let you know in a second, of the 12 and 12. Let's get to the book. Chapter 2. There is a Solution. We of Alcoholics Anonymous know thousands of men and women who were once just as hopeless as Bill. Nearly all have recovered. They have solved the drink problem. We're average Americans. All sections of this country and many of its occupations are represented, as well as many political, economic, social, and religious backgrounds. We are people who normally would not mix. But there exists among us a fellowship, a friendliness, and an understanding which is indescribably wonderful. We are like the passengers of a great liner the moment after rescue from a shipwreck, when camaraderie, joyousness, and democracy pervade the vessel from steerage to captain's table. Unlike the feelings of the ship's passengers, however, our joy in escape from disaster does not subside when we go our individual ways. The feeling of having shared in the common peril is one element in the powerful cement which binds us. That in itself would never have held us together, as we are now joined. The tremendous fact for every one of us is that we have discovered a common solution. We have a way out on which we can absolutely agree, and upon which we can join in brotherly and harmonious action. This is the great news this book carries to those who suffer from alcoholism. An illness of this sort, and we have come to believe it an illness, involves those about us in a way that no other human sickness can. If a person has cancer, all are sorry for him and no one is angry or hurt. But not so with the alcoholic illness. For with it, there goes annihilation of all things worthwhile in life. It engulfs all whose lives touch the sufferers. It brings misunderstanding, fierce resentment, financial insecurity, disgusted friends and employers, warped lives of blameless children, sad wives and parents. Anyone can increase the list. We hope this volume will inform and comfort those who are or may be affected. There are many. Highly competent psychiatrists who have dealt with us have found it sometimes impossible to persuade an alcoholic to discuss his situation without reserve. Strangely enough, wives, parents, and intimate friends usually find us even more unapproachable than do the psychiatrist and the doctor. But the ex-problem drinker who has found this solution, who is properly armed with facts about himself, can generally win the entire confidence of another alcoholic in a few hours. Until such an understanding is reached, little or nothing can be accomplished. That the man who is making the approach has had the same difficulty, that he obviously knows what he is talking about, that his whole deportment shouts at the new prospect that he is a man with a real answer, that he has no attitude of holier than thou, nothing whatever except the sincere desire to be helpful, that there are no fees to pay, no axes to grind, no people to please, no lectures to be endured. These are the conditions we have found most effective. After such an approach, many take up their beds and walk again. None of us make a sole vocation of this work, nor do we think its effectiveness would increase if we did. We feel that an elimination of our drinking is but a beginning. A much more important demonstration of our principles lies before us in our respected homes, occupations, and affairs. All of us spend much of our spare time in the sort of effort which we are going to describe. A few are fortunate enough to be so situated that they can give nearly all their time to the work. If we keep on the way that we're going, there's little doubt that much good will result. But the surface of the problem would hardly be scratched. Those of us who live in large cities are overcome by the reflection that, close by, hundreds are dropping into oblivion every day. Many could recover if they had the opportunity that we have enjoyed. How then shall we present that which is so freely given to us? We have concluded to publish an anonymous volume setting forth the problem as we see it. We shall bring to the task our combined experience and knowledge. This should suggest a useful program for anyone concerned with a drinking problem. Of necessity, there will have to be a discussion of matters medical, psychiatric, social, and religious. We are aware that these matters are, from their very nature, controversial. Nothing would please us so much as to write a book which would contain no basis for contention or argument. We shall do our utmost to achieve that ideal. Most of us sense that real tolerance of other people's shortcomings and viewpoints and a respect for their opinions and attitudes which make us more useful to others. Our very lives as ex-problem drinkers depend upon our constant thought of others and how we may help meet their needs. You may have already asked yourself, why is it that all of us have become so very ill from drinking? Doubtless you're curious to discover how and why, in the face of expert opinion to the contrary, we have recovered from a hopeless condition of mind and body. If you are an alcoholic who wants to get over it, you may already be asking, what do I have to do? It is the purpose of this book to answer such questions specifically. We shall tell you what we have done. Before going into detailed discussion, it may be well to summarize some points as we see them. How many people have said to us, I can take it or leave it alone. Why can't he? Why don't you drink like a gentleman or quit? That fellow can't handle his liquor. Why don't you try beer and wine? Hey, lay off the hard stuff. His willpower must be weak. He could stop if he wanted to. She's such a sweet girl. I should think that he'd stop for her sake. The doctor told him that if he ever drank again, it would kill him. But there he is, all lit up again. Now, these are commonplace observations on drinkers, which we hear all the time. Back of them is a world of ignorance and misunderstanding. We see that these expressions refer to people whose reactions are very different from ours. Moderate drinkers have little trouble in giving up liquor entirely if they have good reason for it. They can take it or leave it alone. Then we have a certain type of hard drinker. He may have the habit badly enough to gradually impair him physically and mentally. It may cause him to die a few years before his time. If a sufficiently strong reason, ill health, falling in love, change of environment, or the warning of a doctor, becomes operative, this man can also stop or moderate, although he may find it difficult and troublesome and may even need some medical attention. But what about the real alcoholic? I figured we'd stop there on that one. Okay, we'll learn about the real alcoholic a little bit more tomorrow, according to Chapter 2 of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And all right, everybody, so we left off on page 23 of the 12 and 12, at the very first paragraph where it says, it is a tremendous satisfaction. Real briefly yesterday, talking about step 1, we learned a little bit about the tyrant alcohol wielding a double-edged sword, talking about one side of that sword being the insane urge that condemned us to go on drinking, the obsession of the mind. And then the other edge of that lethal sword is the allergy of the body that ensured that we would ultimately destroy ourselves in the process. And one of the last sentences that we left off with was, many less desperate alcoholics tried AA, but did not succeed because they could not make the admission of hopelessness. And we'll take it from there. It is a tremendous satisfaction to record that in the following years, this changed. Alcoholics who still had their health, their families, their jobs, and even 2 cars in the garage began to recognize their alcoholism. As this trend grew, they were joined by young people who were scarcely more than potential alcoholics. They were spared that last 10 or 15 years of literal hell the rest of us had gone through. Since step 1 requires an admission that our lives have become unmanageable, how could people such as these take this step? It was obviously necessary to raise the bottom the rest of us had hit to the point where it would hit them. By going back in our own drinking histories, we could show that years before we realized it, we were out of control, that our drinking even then was no mere habit, that it was indeed the beginning of a fatal progression. To the doubters, we could say, perhaps you're not an alcoholic after all. Why don't you try some more controlled drinking? Bearing in mind, meanwhile, what we have told you about alcoholism. This attitude brought immediate and practical results. It was then discovered that when one alcoholic had planted in the mind of another the true nature of his malady, that person could never be the same again. Following every spree, he would say to himself, maybe those AAs were right. After a few such experiences, often years before the onset of extreme difficulties, he would return to us convinced he had hit bottom as truly as any of us. John Barleycorn himself had become our best advocate. All right, guys. So that concludes today's reading. And first of all, I just want to say that I really liked what we read in the big book about, there being that common solution and the fellowship and the camaraderie of the fellowship. And also talking about how there are those of us who have had absolute rock bottoms, and there are those of us who haven't lost everything. But to listen to the suffering alcoholic and their stories, and you realize that your mindset is exactly the same, the way you think about alcohol is the exact same, doesn't really matter if you didn't have to serve prison time or 3 or 4 divorces or whatever. If the thinking and the obsession and the allergy is the same, it's an even playing field if you think about it that way. But anyways, I hope that made sense. I hope you all have a wonderful week. It's Monday. I hope you have a great start to your week. And we will see you back here tomorrow.